Hello, my name is LL Nelson, and I am the author of the Tempest Via Taurus series, which right now is on Kickstarter. And as part of having people get to know my series, I want to share a few chapters of the first book in the series, Priestess of Herculaneum. So if you enjoy books that have Doctor Who vibes, Outlander vibes, mythology from around the world, fated mates, found family, and a fade to gray romance, then follow me as I read the first few chapters of this book. So, starting off, we are going to chapter 1. So, here we go. Priestess of Herculaneum, chapter 1. Phone, wallet, keys. I tried to think of what else I would need before heading to the museum downtown. I didn't expect to be back at my apartment until late tonight, or possibly tomorrow morning, depending on how this evening went with Jackson. Rena, what time is it? I looked at the hall bathroom before poking around for my comfiest work shoes. I'd be walking a lot today, and I didn't want my feet to kill me while Jackson and I explored the exhibit. It's 7:28. My roommate Corinna's heavy Dutch accent carried down from the hall bathroom, where she was getting ready for the day herself. What time is the gallery event, Alex? Shit. It's at 9. I gotta go. I slipped on my heeled flats and ran out the door, taking the staircase closest to our apartment door. The elevator was usually quick enough unless I was in a hurry. Then inevitably it would have to open on every floor going down. Normally it wouldn't have been an issue to leave an hour and a half before an event, but something in my gut told me today was going to be eventful, and that feeling usually preceded me being late when I couldn't afford to be. Today was especially not a day I could afford to be late. I was representing the Bremer Silburn estate, our archives, and the pieces it had loaned to this exhibit. If I wasn't at the museum exactly when they opened or when the tour started, it would reflect poorly on everyone, not just me. As I swiped my card, letting me pass the turnstiles and into the metro station proper, my phone buzzed. I ignored it, running to catch the open doors before it was too late. Unfortunately, the cars were already packed. By the time I made it to the platform, the doors were already closing. Double shit. The screen above my head said 8 minutes until the next yellow train would arrive, heading north and across the river. Annoyed, but with nothing to do but wait, I pulled out my phone and looked at the notification. It was from Jackson. That wasn't good. He only texted me if something bad had happened, or if it was urgent. Otherwise, he hated text messages, always saying how unprofessional they were compared to calling and talking in person. I can't make it to the museum opening thing. Sorry. Work is busy today. My heart fell as I read those words. It wasn't the end of the world, but I'd been looking forward to seeing him. He'd secured a new job working for some lobbying group with the new administration. I knew he'd been busy, but at the same time, it'd been weeks since we'd been able to go on a date together. We'd been a couple since college, long distance, short distance, everything short of living together. While everything was amazing when we had time to see each other, those times had become fewer and fewer in recent months. Cold air brushed past me as the blue train pulled into the station, and I shifted to move out of people's way. Before I could type out a response, my phone buzzed again, and I looked down to see another text from Jackson. By the way, we should talk soon. As much as it hurts me to say this, I think it may be time to just be friends. What? My voice came out louder than I expected, and a couple of people moved away from me. Tears started to form in my eyes, and I tried to brush them away. My outburst was embarrassing enough without people having to watch me cry. My phone buzzed again and again as I tried to find a less public place to read the new text. You are a great person, but it feels like our lives are moving in two different directions. It's only fair that we look at seeing other people, or spend time getting to know ourselves as individuals. Plus, I'm getting a little worn out by all the museum dates, LOL. Anger flushed through me. What the hell was that even supposed to mean? As I read over the texts again, I tried to imagine them as a joke. But Jackson would never joke like this. This wasn't his type of humor. And how was I supposed to respond? Okay, cool. Sorry our relationship was annoying you. Sorry I'm not good enough to be your girlfriend anymore. Without thinking, I dialed his phone number, hoping to get a straight answer out of him. Instead, the phone rang and rang. It didn't even get to the voicemail. I looked around, remembering that this station had terrible cell reception. We were technically underground, and I was usually lucky to even get any reception down here. "What the hell, Jackson?" I whispered, trying to think what I should do next. At the very least, I needed to respond and figure out what had just happened. Before I could respond to his text, the automated voice announcing the arrival of the yellow train. Automated voice announced the arrival of the yellow train. 8 minutes ago, I'd only been worried that I'd be late to the exhibit opening. Now I was wondering if Jackson breaking up with me after nearly 4 years of dating had been the gut feeling I'd had this morning. Logically, I knew breakups weren't an earth-shattering event, but I felt like my world had just been rocked. This was more than just not being able to make the event with me. This was him tossing aside 4 years of history and a relationship I thought both of us had enjoyed. I'd trusted him. As I made my way onto the train and found a seat to squeeze into, my mind kept spinning. Why now? Why over text? He hated text messages. Plus, Jackson had been the person I'd imagined my life with for so long. I'd imagined both of us climbing the career ladder in our various professions, owning a townhome together, getting married, and now we were over, just like that, over text message? I shoved my phone back into my purse and leaned forward to cry. There was no way this day could get any more awful or bizarre. I got off of the metro at L'Enfant Plaza, not having the emotional energy to deal with the crowds pushing their way through the various platforms. The museum was close enough that if I hurried, I could get there in plenty of time by walking. While on the metro, I decided to call Jackson. If he was going to break up with me, he couldn't just do it over text. I wanted to hear his voice. As I walked along the remnants of the mall's grass, mostly still mud from all the people who had been here in January, I dialed Jackson's phone number. It rang twice before he picked up. "Hello, this is Jackson Prentice III. May I ask whom I'm speaking to?" "Jackson, you know exactly who I am. You texted me not 20 minutes ago. Last I checked, you preferred phone calls." There was a long pause. "Hi, Alexandra. I was hoping to talk to you sooner about our former relationship, but..." "Our former relationship? You could have talked to me this morning at the event you promised to attend with me." "I could have, but work has been busy, and to be honest, I was afraid you'd make a scene. All with the crying and whatnot. It would have been embarrassing for both of us." "So texting me some lame excuse and then breaking up with me that way is less embarrassing?" "For me it is. Look, I don't have much time to chat, but I was being honest when I said I think we're moving in 2 different directions. You have your work at that little museum, and I am a lobbyist who deals with congresspeople every day. You prefer to stay in the past, and I want to change the future. It's not a bad thing. It's just we're different from when we first met in college. Those differences are becoming too big to ignore. You couldn't wait until tonight or this weekend to talk to me in person. You decided the best way to end a 4-year relationship was to text me?" The anger in me got more intense and I snapped. "That's something a college freshman would do. Are you still 18, Jackson?" More silence. "You are overreacting, Alexandra. As usual. Look, I have a meeting in a few minutes. I can't be late. Unlike you, I prefer to be punctual." "Jackson, you are such a..." "Alexandra, I will say this once more. We're over. Please don't call me again. You'll just be embarrassing yourself further." Before I could say anything, the call disconnected and I was left staring at my phone. What had just happened? I walked across the mall numbly, looking for a place to compose myself. Unfortunately, every museum and building was closed until 10 o'clock, leaving me with no place to lick my wounds in solitude. Jackson was a jerk. I'd trusted him, but now I realized I'd been an idiot. I'd seen him rip into people eloquently but viciously before, insulting them in such a way that they couldn't retort without looking like a fool. Exactly what he'd just done to me. Now I felt gutted, angry, hurt, and like I'd been a moron all along. Knowing Jackson, he'd be over it by lunchtime. The only silver lining to this debacle of a morning was the fact that I was within sight of the museum. I could stop and wipe off any errant makeup, as well as compose myself so I wouldn't look completely unprofessional when I got to the exhibit. While the cool air was good for calming me down, it took longer than I wanted for the redness to fade from my eyes and cheeks, which meant I didn't get into the museum until just after 9 o'clock. The exhibit itself was on the 3rd floor, and the entrance was in an area set apart from the rest of the galleries. The only way to access it was by walking across an open bridge that gave an amazing view of the lower floors. Usually, the bridge was a stunning feature and one of my favorite parts of this building. However, right now, it just made me feel awkward and exposed, more so than I was already feeling. A group of people already stood in front of the exhibit's entrance, focused on the woman speaking to them. As I slipped in to one side, a few people shifted to make room, and one lady grimaced. I felt like a complete and utter idiot. You are an idiot. You should have known better than to trust the metro and traffic, and you shouldn't have called Jackson. Then you wouldn't have cried and embarrassed yourself, or had to wait outside until you looked more normal. That's why you're a loser and no one wants you. You're just an enormous failure. I bit the inside of my lip to keep from crying anymore. I hated that voice inside my head, and yet, maybe that was why Jackson had broken up with me. Not just because of the bullshit excuse about us growing apart. Maybe I was still giving off college student vibes instead of young professional vibes. Maybe I just wasn't successful enough. Maybe I was a joke and... No. I had done a lot of good work over the years. There was a reason my bosses at the Bremer Silbern had sent me here. It wasn't because I was some idiot college kid. It was because I'd networked with the curators of this exhibit and was able to add pieces from our collection to it. People would see the pieces, be curious about what else the Bremer Silbern estate had in its collections, and come visit. Jackson had broken up with me because he was a loser. He'd promised to meet me here and even promised to clear his morning because this event was so important to me. Then he canceled a few hours before, only to add insult to injury by breaking up with me because he thinks we've grown apart and he doesn't like museum dates? No, Jackson was the loser. He'd never complained about our time together before and had left me to plan our activities. If he didn't enjoy going to museums and other cultural events, he could have told me long ago, not just texted, "Hey, let's break up," and treated me like I was some kind of embarrassment. And yet here I was alone. It hurt. I'd trusted him to keep his word. I'd trusted myself. What had that led to? Me alone and feeling like a fraud in a group of fellow museum people. Here is our new exhibit on the art of Campania. I turned my attention to the young woman in front of us who was still speaking. I'd been too engrossed in my own thoughts to even hear half of what she'd been saying. My embarrassment grew deeper. It will open tomorrow to the public, but prior to that, we at the museum wanted to give a private tour to the various archives and institutions who helped us. The concept and vision we have here is for guests to feel as though they have traveled back in time to the places like Pompeii and Herculaneum themselves. She grabbed a handful of pamphlets and began passing them out. I took one as soon as they made their way back to me and gave it a cursory glance as she continued. We've designed the exhibit to be self-guided, so feel free to explore on your own. If you have questions, I'd be delighted to answer them. The young woman unhooked one of the stanchions cordoning off the exhibit and pulled on a rope to open up the velvet-looking curtains. They drew back to reveal a room where the light was dimmer. It was still well lit, but it gave the impression of moving into a new world. This was really nice. As heavy as my thoughts had been a moment earlier, as soon as she opened the curtains, it felt like the gloom hanging over me was pushed away. Before we go in, however, I want you all to close your eyes and imagine the modern world floating away. All those emails, texts, and other distractions are disappearing as we speak. There is a hint of laughter in her voice, and a few people responded with their own chuckles. I glanced around and saw most of the other guests following her instructions. Quickly, I closed my eyes as well. You are a time traveler. Through some sort of magic, I have transported you back into the world of ancient Rome. Not Rome itself, but a stretch of land to the south. A place where the elites of Rome come to vacation and rest. And yet, they aren't the only people here. There are thousands more who live and work in this area. Young, old, well-off, and poor. Some are free and others are slaves. But you, time traveler, will be the first to arrive. Will first arrive in the villa of an elite family. They have welcomed you into their home and are showing off their wealth and prestige. What you see here is the culmination of generations before. These patricians move in elite circles back in Rome, and they are not afraid to show off, even when they are on vacation. The woman stopped, and I opened one eye as she surveyed the group with a smile. It surprised me to see how young she was. She appeared to be about my age, yet had already been entrusted with tasks like these. Not only that, but she looked confident despite being surrounded by people who probably had decades more experience than either of us. She cleared her throat and I closed my eye again. However, a patrician's villa isn't the only place you will see while time traveling. While their art is the kind we are most familiar with, it isn't the only kind to be found in Campania. The plebeians and slaves have their culture in these places as well. As you leave the elite villa, you'll see the art of the common man, which isn't as far off from the elite family's mosaics and sculptures as you might think. Another pause, and then she continued, "You may open your eyes now and enter. Welcome to the world and artwork of ancient Campania."